Hi, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lucas Susi, and I head up North America for Congruent Solutions. First, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and taking a break from hitting the refresh button on their browser to see who won the presidential election. I think it's been a pretty great week at Spark so far. Even though this week in Boston, we've had some pretty good weather, I have to be honest, I do miss being at the breakers. But Spark's really done a fantastic job this week. We've had some pretty topical content like Tim Scott's session on the impact of COVID-19 in the workplace. By the way, Tim, thanks for the cameo in the golf outing picture. I would have to agree with you that really was the last time I think that we all experienced something normal in our work and travel environments. And of course, yesterday we had the always popular Washington update from Davis and Harman. I think the only disappointment I've had so far this week was that Chris did not try and sneak in a picture of Mike Hadley into a slide deck. But Mike did promise to ruin Chris's Christmas, so maybe a little mischief's afoot for the next conference. So we'll see what happens, right? Anyway, today we're going to talk about preparing for tomorrow to provide great CX for sponsors and participants. As an industry, we've seen a lot of changes since the first defined contribution plan was created in 1978, where paper was the medium. Changes have come about due to regulatory adjustments, some very recent, like the Secure Act, CARES Act, and of course, the very recent e-delivery as a default, which is something that Spark we fought very hard for a long time. All the way up to technology trends that saw a workforce leaning more towards a mobile environment, and then to our current climate where everyone is working from home now. So technology is changing every day, yet as an industry, I don't feel that we've always kept up. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges and more importantly, some of the solutions and paths forward. During the discussion, please feel free to enter questions by going to the Q&A section. If we have time during the panel, we'll try and address them then. Otherwise, we'll get to them at the end and you can visit us in our virtual booth following the panel discussion. So what am I going to say next? Well, we have a great panel assembled here, of course, right? Everyone always says that, but honestly, I mean it. I'm very lucky to have this group of panelists I have with me today. I'm going to allow each of them to introduce themselves really quickly, and then we'll jump right into it. So Cynthia, if you could do the honors, please.
Thank you, Lucas, and thanks to Congruent for hosting this session. I'm Cynthia Hayes. I'm president of Oculus Partners. I formed Oculus Partners in 2008, and we serve a lot of the providers in the industry, many of you probably in attendance today. And my most important accomplishment is I believe this is probably my 32nd or 31st Spark meeting. And so I was part of the original founding group. So it's great to be here and great to see the continuation of the tradition.
Excellent. Jason, if you could go next, please.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Lucas, for the invite. I'm Jason Lenardson, and I'm from Lincoln Financial Group. I'm the Vice President of our IT over Retirement Plan Services, leading both our operations initiatives as well as our digital initiatives.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. Eric, please.
Thanks, Lucas. Very happy to participate in this webinar. I'm Eric Brickman. I'm Executive Vice President and Chief Solutions Officer with Newport, leading a retirement and executive benefit firm throughout the country, and very much focused on innovation and technology, and very much the topic we're talking about today. So looking forward to it.
Thank you, Eric. And Bala, please.
Thank you, Lucas, and thanks to all of our panelists for being part of this. I'm Bala, co-founder and president of Congruent Solutions. We've been in the retirement market for the last 20 years. We've now become a specialist retirement provider and do two kinds of services. We do outsourced plan administration and transaction processing services for mid-market TPAs and large tier 1 providers. And we have a core suite of technology solutions for the provider market. It's great to be part of this panel. I thank Spark for it.
Thank you, Bob. Excellent, fantastic. Well, let's get right into it then and hit it off with defining some of the challenges. So Cynthia, the first one's to you. You have both experience running the business and now you consult with organizations in the retirement space. So you've seen a lot of things, to say the least, right? What, in your opinion, are the top challenges that the industry faces today?
And you forgot to mention I'm old enough to remember all these things too.
A gentleman doesn't ask and a lady doesn't tell. So,
I think that I would characterize the challenges today as being in 5 categories to me. Not all of these relate to technology specifically, but overall 5 challenges. First, I think everyone is highly aware this is a very mature market. scale is absolutely required to price effectively and to continue to invest in the business as is needed. Secondly, I think government is helping, right? That's always an interesting statement to make, particularly in light of where we are. But there's a lot of real change going on in Washington, change in major policies as it relates to retirement. And so I think those policy changes are causing significant challenges in the industry in terms of both opportunities as well as things that are risks for various business models. Third, and this really comes from looking at a lot of providers over the years, I think as an industry, we make things more complicated and we make things more custom than I think is absolutely necessary. So part of, I think, is our mindset of what is our value proposition as an industry? Is it simplicity and understanding and success, or is it complexity and customization? I think that's a challenge for us. Fourth, clearly is about customer expectations. We often talk about demographic changes in the participant base and all of the things that brings with it, but we don't often talk about the changes in demographics to the sponsor base and the advisor base. Many sponsors and advisors that we've worked with for a long tenure have been baby boomers. Those are gradually being replaced by younger executives. And advisors tend to be a fairly older group. As that changes, those customer expectations around experience design and digital strategies are going to be really continuing to be challenging for us and in new ways. And then also those customer expectations go beyond defined contribution now. Defined contribution providers are now looking and working with HSAs and 529s, student loan management, financial wellness solutions of all types. So the breadth of our business is getting broader. And then last, to me, is the entire post-retirement solution challenge. We are still in the infancy of that effort, and we are really only halfway toward retirement success. Accumulation has to come with decumulation. And the answers that are going to be needed to solve for post-retirement solutions are very wide-ranging. They encompass everything that we've used to improve and handle the accumulation side of the equation. It's new services, new products, new advisor and sponsor support models, new participant experiences. So all five of those things kind of give about a 360 view of all the challenges that are coming at this industry. And I will say that in all of my time in this business, I've never seen everyone as challenged. I don't care how large you are or how small, everyone is fairly uniquely challenged at this point.
Thank you, Cynthia. Just a few small things, right, to deal with, right? A few small challenges. Honestly, there are a lot of moving parts. I think on one hand, you have the client's expectations, right? They want what they want, but they may not know what they need. Stirring policy changes, fee compression, right? And also, as you pointed out, that despite being a fairly mature industry, and maybe not compared to others, but a fairly mature industry, we're now only just touching on decumulation, right, and what to do after retirement. So it's a lot to take in, I think. Eric, I'll go to you next then, please. You lead Newport's Global Solutions and Innovation. What are the key technology trends you see impacting the business, and how experiences are delivered to sponsors and participants?
Sure, Lucas. In the last dozen or so years, we've seen a significant shift where providers were really focused on building feature functionality. It was all about how many checkboxes could you complete on an RFP? What's the level of complexity that you can provide in your product and overall experience? And that kind of complexity yielded value. But now it's exactly the opposite, where complexity doesn't yield value, simplicity yields value. Everyone's looking for that Apple type experience or that Google type experience. So it's not about give me access to 50 different functions online and make me figure out how a website works and all these drill downs and click here, click here. How do you just make it so simple that I click in, I do one thing, and I get in, get out really fast? So the shift is from robustness and complexity to simplicity and ease of use. And one of the ways is through leveraging automation and things like AI and machine learning So the systems can do the thinking on behalf of the client versus making them do it all on their own in an industry which is complex for the subject matter experts. The most of the actual participants and a lot of the sponsors, it's a complex industry to grasp your hand around. So doing the thinking for them and just telling them, you need to do X, Y, Z right now, click yes or no, really elevates the engagement for the overall industry. And as Cynthia said, cross-platform, cross-product interoperability, it's not just about retirement anymore. It's the health and HSA and the student loans. And, people are more and more looking at this from a kind of a holistic, aggregated, person-centric view of the world. And the times of I go into different product or system silos to deal with very discrete components of my financial picture are becoming a thing of the past. It's now going to be about how do all these different products and services all work together to help me as an individual, largely driven by the millennial expectation, which is, the millennials, I'm the most important person in the world, you better work around me versus me working around you. So, and that's a culture that we need to adopt. And frankly, the other generations also start accepting that also, because you realize it's actually a much easier way to do business once you figure out how the individual or the client wants to work with you. So some of the more detailed areas, obviously mobile first is a big strategy right now. The days of making everyone log into a desktop, are soon going to be over, and everything's going to be in the palm of your hand, and it'll go with you wherever you are. So mobile first design is important. Messaging is really important. Again, not putting the onus on the individual participant, have to log into a website and figure out what to do and then execute on it. It's about push the information out to the participant, message them when they need to do something, give them a real easy, big green button, big red button, do it yes or no, click and be done. It's the engagement, and it's kind of that ether, where the technology and the websites and then the person, but it's that engagement and messaging, which is really where the experience is going to really start to blossom, and which is going to start paying off both on the business side and the user experience side. Just a couple architectural points. A lot of retirement firms have built very kind of large and monolithic platforms. That you got the front end and the databases and the API layers and the back end record keeping systems and the trading systems. Again, there's no lack of systems that our product technology and our organizations need to use to be successful in this business. But the key moving forward is to be able to have that plug and play mentality. So you're not necessarily tied to one particular solution for one particular function, because there's disruptors and new entrants hitting the market all the time, and you got to be able to take advantage of that. And if you don't have that architecture that allows you to plug and play from a best in breed perspective, whether it's a best in breed UI or a trading component or a personal rate of return component, a statement component, a messaging component, you got to be able to leverage the new technology because it changes so fast, and you kind of be left in the dust. So to be successful in the industry, you got to be able to adapt and change very quickly to new entrants into the market. The last piece I would say is, building an experience not just around the product, but around the community. We're seeing a lot of community-based experiences, and again, driven by millennials and driven by the Facebooks and the Twitters of the world, where people can interact amongst their own peer groups and define their peer groups. Building a retirement experience that leverages and benefits from a community aspect will again grow the engagement and the participation rates across the industry. So there are a lot of challenges, but there's a whole bunch of opportunities for this industry, which personally make me very excited.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric. Yeah, it sounds like things seem to be trending, towards the individual experience, right? Rather than, kind of a more old blanket statement of one size or one solution fits all. You might reference like a monolithic solutions, but really, trying to utilize some of the more technologies like maybe AI or, plug and play architecture, and how we really design our systems, right, is going to be able to push it a little bit further, right? And that's probably true not just of the actual user experience, right? And talking about user logs in and they are able to see, multiple facets of, of their wealth, whether it be, banking, healthcare, things like that, kind of putting it all together, but really also again, using multiple solutions to be able to accomplish that and not need one big bang thing to be able to do it all for you, right? So, thank you. Shifting over to you, Bala. At Congruent, we've been servicing the retirement plan industry for about 2 decades now. So what are the drivers for technology modernization in this ecosystem as a whole that you see? Oh, Bala, you may be on mute. Sorry.
I'm on. Am I audible now? Yeah. No, I was just saying, Cynthia and Eric have already touched upon some, but I'll actually add about 3 other points. One of the drivers, in my opinion, is the outdated legacy platforms that were designed, developed 25 plus years ago. They cost huge amounts of dollars for the upkeep and maintenance. And in one of the recent reports by the Everest Group, they said that if providers move to contemporary cloud-based platforms, the industry as a whole can save close to about $850 to $900 million. That's almost $1 billion every year by the shift to more contemporary platforms. And what that really would translate is a lot of savings for the provider, which will then get passed on to the sponsors and participants, which in turn will, enable the average American worker to, save more. And that's precisely what we as an industry stand for, help the American worker get ready for tomorrow. And I think that's one key driver. And the second one, in my opinion, is what Cynthia alluded to as mindset. So I think as an industry, if, we are caught up in this mindset of why fix something that ain't broken, I think that could be a huge stumbling block for the industry. I keep, whenever I talk about transformation to people, I keep referring to the story of Kodak, where they had everything in their hands. They had the digital camera patent with them, and yet they blew that opportunity because they felt, it leaked into what they are doing already. So, in my opinion, if providers don't modernize technology, they can actually get run over by some of these new generation players that Eric talked about. And we might well see a driver of either modernize or perish. And I think we as an industry have to take note of that. And the last point is what both Cynthia and Eric have talked about, that of customer experience. I think we as an industry have to come to terms that we will have more and more millennials and Gen X as a very significant part of the population that's serving, saving for retirement. In fact, there is a statistic which says the millennials will earn 46% of all income in the US in another 5 years, 2025. And there are a number of studies to show that the expectations, Eric talked about it, expectations of customer experience of this generation is very different from the baby boomers and the Gen X. So call centers would exist for the older ones, but then we as an industry have to move towards more an intuitive experience. You talked about Apple, Google, and those kind of experiences, and mobile first, of course. But yesterday I heard Jenny Johnson talk about a very innovative idea of maybe introduce even gamification to entice this new generation, Gen Z especially, to save more. I think these are some of the drivers I see as influencing the modernization of technology in all these providers.
Thank you, Bala. Thank you. So Jason, Bala covered some broad trends, outdated platforms, fixed mindsets that are resistant to change, which we'll touch upon a little bit, and changing demographics that are going to influence the customer experience going forward and their expectations. What are the primary drivers, I guess, of modernization of administration platforms specifically for you at Lincoln?
Well, we definitely look at overall total cost of ownership. As Paula mentioned, we all have legacy systems that are decades old at this point, and so reducing the legacy technology costs is definitely key for us. If we think about the older technologies, just the ability to update servers or mainframes, keep them even current, licensed, those types of things, all significant cost. the ability for us to integrate into them. I think one of the things Eric mentioned is you can, lots of hardware, lots of options on the way to integrate, and you can broaden your architecture. But modernization lets us, eliminate some of that overhead with all of those new pieces and parts, if we could just get it right. And then the cost to enhance. So each enhancement that comes up, we're basically writing code against older systems that at some point in time we do need to modernize or get out of there. So that you're often doing things that you're going to have to rework at a later time. Sometimes what's lost in some of the total cost of ownership is actually the retaining the skill sets. So there was a time when getting COBOL programmers was not as expensive as they are today, right? Finding RPG expertise, those types of things, those costs have all gone up because the overall capacity is not there. So those are things that definitely we factor in when we're looking at this to move to new skills. In the end, when we're thinking about modernization, we have to be able to move on, getting the best in class experiences. We have to be able to do it better, faster, cheaper. We've got to be able to live in the digital world, and some of those old platforms are not allowing us to do that. And so we've got to get to APIs. We've got to be able to pivot for each and every new technology that's coming. So one of the things that Eric mentioned was the ability to pivot. So in modernization, we're still far enough behind. We're trying to catch up to today, and by the time we get to today, tomorrow's going to be here, and we have to factor all of that stuff. So we have to modernize these systems in such that we're able to provide what's available today and be ready to pivot to tomorrow without waiting another 2 decades to do so. So definitely the things we look at.
Thanks, Jason. I mean, there's definitely a lot of work to be done in industry, I think. I like to say no good deed goes unpunished, right? So, you work hard to put something in place over here, and then 3 more things are added to your charter that require your focus over there, right? So a little bit of follow-up then to you, Jason. So you have a pretty large digital initiative. With so many different players jockeying for attention, then how do you decide what gets addressed and what gets priority?
Yeah, so at Lincoln, our digital initiatives across all of our lines of business. So it's one of those things that we're fighting for funds in the checkbook just like everybody else would do. But for us, it's a pretty good process, a solid process across the board. Look at the value of the overall opportunity, right? And value doesn't just mean money. It could be the financial. It could be the experience we need to provide for the customers to stay current. It could be that differentiating experience. We'll definitely factor those in. We look at can we build it? Can we partner with somebody else that already has it? That's become a key strategy for us. Can we buy it? Can it be, now we start looking at timelines. Can it be phased in and incremental versus, having to, big bang everything about, the new options. And then can we support it, right? Are we ready to support it? Is our business ready to support it? We look at the risk. What's the risk of achieving the value, right? So some projects may look like they're going to have this great return on the end of it, but everything has to fall in line. So we'll look at that risk of actually achieving that and to determine if that's the one that we're going to select or something that's a little less risky in achieving value. And then what's the risk of waiting? We just talked a little bit about modernization, but what's the risk of waiting, to get to these new digital initiatives? And then how can we incrementally get to value? So again, moving away from the big bang. So in the end, it comes down to the value of the opportunity, the risk of achieving it, and the upfront cost. What's the actual commitment towards that digital effort?
Thank you, Jason. Eric, let's shift direction a little bit and let's talk about technology itself. So in your paper on cybersecurity, you talk about Eric's digital hierarchy, an inspiration from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What are the challenges for the retirement plan industry with the current technology trends that you're seeing?
Thanks, Lucas. Yeah, I can't take all the credit for this. I did write a paper on it. People have called it Eric's digital hierarchy. I can't actually say I have any kind of branded philosophical ownership towards that. If you take Maslow's hierarchy, which is, starts bottom of the triangle is the physical needs, goes up through self-actualization, the concept is, the digital space has its own hierarchy where the base of it is systems and data, and then security, and then feature functionality experience, and then it goes up to adoption and behavior. The challenge in today's environment is that with the pace of change in technology and the ever-growing cybersecurity threats that continually surface, it's difficult for individuals and organizations to obtain complete trust in those foundational layers, which hinders their ability to fully realize the value and benefits of the functional and experiential layers, which will ultimately lead towards the behavioral modification and adoption piece, which is where everyone's hoping to get to. One of the best ways to cover a more kind of systematic trust issue is to provide highly personalized and timely messaging. The more that we as an industry can show our participants that we have an in-depth understanding of individuals and organizations and are able to leverage this deeper knowledge to generate higher levels of intimacy, deliver greater personalization, and drive an engagement-based experience, the faster we'll be able to foster and grow trust, which will ultimately help us yield greater behavioral modification and adoption. It's kind of analogous to the retirement industry kind of taking a lesson from a data-driven e-commerce model. I like to use the analogy, what would happen if Amazon entered the retirement space? Well, we have a very different data-driven business model. And it's that kind of data-driven experience which helps to foster trust and engagement, and ultimately you realize the behavior mods and the participants, and obviously the business impact and benefit of that as a result. So it's understanding what trust is, feeding into that trust, and then growing from there. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does to me. I really like your statement about intimacy in that, right? To me, it's not just personalization. That's only one thing, right? But intimacy really is about, empathizing with your customers, right? Anticipating their needs, putting yourself in their shoes. And I don't think we really do enough of that right now. Doing so, I think, would really allow us to be able to tailor an experience a little bit more and make it feel like that the customer is really the priority, right, and the focus, and that they're important, right? And building that trust, as you talked about. As for Amazon, if they take over the retirement industry, I'm sure it'll be very disruptive. I just hope it comes with a free streaming service or something like that. So I get a little something out of it. I know Cynthia said some comments before on Amazon as well too, kind of an inspiration to her as well. Cynthia, you've shared some thoughts on that. If you want to provide your quote there, that I like to hear every now and again. So.
Well, the thing I always quote about Amazon is that no one forces me to use Amazon for shopping. I use Amazon for shopping because it's a great experience. It doesn't cost any more or significantly more. It's easy. And they always tell me exactly where my packages are. I don't have to worry. Those are things that carry forward regardless of industry, and they're lessons we can learn.
Absolutely. So Cynthia, Bala touched on it some. It seems, everyone really knows that technology can be a little bit of a roadblock to make the changes that we all want to make, right? So why is it, do you think, that the retirement plan industry is slow to adapt these newer technologies?
Well, there's probably lots and lots of reasons. I kind of boil it down to three. Two, I think, are fairly widely understood. An observation I've made over the last 12 years or so with Oculus. I think the most important thing is a fear of risk. We have a natural aversion to risk, I think, in this business anyway, but I think people have been promised things in the past with either brand new vendors or they've been promised things that haven't come to fruition. And so we built up these hugely complex environments, and I don't care whether you're a small TPA or you're Fidelity, right? The complexity of the environment that everyone has to work within is tremendous, multiple systems, et cetera. And so changing that is very hard and it takes a risk tolerance that sometimes I don't think we're prepared for. Similarly, I think the second thing that I think causes the slowness is we have a habit of predicting very poor ROI. And some of that is legitimate. I think some of that is that we approach things in very, very incremental ways, and we often don't look at things in the end. So I think we have a hard time predicting excellent ROI, and as we all know, it's hard to get capital investment in any corporation these days. And if you can't predict good ROI and you're already a business that perhaps is less than some of your other peers as profitability is concerned, it's hard. You have to be able to get a better return. Third, that we've seen, particularly over the last 12 years or so, is that technology dollars to us are often spread like peanut butter. Everybody gets to, put their top three out there. It doesn't matter what part of the business or technology or operations part you sit in. And as that happens, then again, there's very little focus on particular areas where technology investments need to be made. We all know that everybody has their needs, but I still see some opportunities for some real different kinds of decision making. One thing I would say, though, here at the end of this little conversation about this subject for me is that I think we are at a real tipping point. I'm old enough to remember when ERISA came out, right? Not many of you can probably say that, but I remember that. And what happened when ERISA came was that the industry completely changed. Everybody that was wildly successful before it did not translate to success after it. I think we have similar things when we look at daily valuation. If you listen to Bob Reynolds' speech this morning, right? There have been tipping points in the industry. I think we're now at another one of those. I don't think that doing business for the next 20 years is going to require the same kinds of things that being successful for the last 20 years has needed. So I do think we have to solve these issues for ourselves.
All right. So Cynthia, just because you brought up the expansion costs and things like that, I'm going to go a little off trail here. Sorry, and you're going to get a bonus question. This one's from the audience right here. So I apologize to put you on the spot on this one here, but I think it's pretty relevant to that. So, creating differential customer experiences, so again, this is from the audience, requires investment. Do you believe price-sensitive plan sponsors and consultants will pay more for better experiences?
No, I don't. Having said that, I do think they can be helpful. Don't get me wrong. I do think they can be differentiating. But I don't think you would necessarily shop at Amazon if it were always extraordinarily more expensive than other solutions. You did not see the pain of their investment in that experience. And by the way, they had a lot of years of unprofitability to go along with that. I realized that, but they did come out pretty well on the back end of that. So I think the challenge is going to be, how do we create enough monetary value in this business for us as providers that we can afford that investment while not necessarily raising prices to completely recoup the cost in a very short term? It's not a 3-year time horizon investment.
Thank you, Cynthia. I knew I could count on you for that. Thank you very much. Fantastic. All right, back to our regularly scheduled program here. So Eric and Jason, this next one is for the both of you. So Cynthia talked about fears, risks and concerns over a poor decision-making process. I think I'd have to say that as an industry, we're pretty risk-averse, right, as a whole. We have been for some time. What strategies do you see to help mitigate those risks? Eric, I'll start with you, please.
Yeah, so, I tend to look at it, the retirement industry kind of, by the nature of the industry itself, is risk-averse, because, right, the whole nature of the industry is helping individuals grow and protect their retirement assets or their retirement income so they can maintain a certain lifestyle later on in life. And by the nature of that long-term outlook, it's risk-averse. It's not necessarily a day trading experience or day trading product by any means. It's not different than an insurance industry, which really plans for the long term and is also risk-averse. They both center around concepts of protecting someone's lifestyle later on, whether it's a service provider who doesn't want to make a mistake relative to operations or impact their service delivery or turnaround times, or an investment advisor who doesn't want to oversee a shrinking portfolio. There's a lot of people focusing on risk. And it's a mentality that permeates the decisions around adopting new technologies. And we had touched on this a little bit. Many in the industry would prefer to be a fast follower or a laggard rather than being an early adopter, either because they don't have the capital to invest in unproven technologies or they don't want to go down the wrong path. Both are, again, risk-averse propositions. Two ways to maybe mitigate this would be to create something called a sandbox environment or joining an incubator where new technologies can be modeled and tested in a safe environment without a lot of the risks that are associated with it. And then once you've proven a certain technology is worth it or it's going to meet the needs, then you start to incorporate it in your core business and your user experience. So it's kind of breaking apart your business as usual model from your sandbox incubator model and letting all the iterations and the trial and error happen in a very safe environment. And then once you've figured out what you need to do and how you need to employ it, then you migrate it into the kind of core product that you're offering. So that's one way to help manage risk in the industry.
Jason, if you'd like to follow, please.
Yeah, so I definitely completely agree with Eric on big expensive projects. They're hard to justify, especially when you can't guarantee the outcome and the value that's going to come. But not long ago, test and learn approaches were even expensive, right? To go get yourself a server, or go get yourself new software that you wanted to try. You had to license all of those things. You had to commit resource to it. You had to stand up your own infrastructure to support it and isolate it from everything else. These days, you don't have to do that. You don't have to carry that expense. A lot of it you can get at fairly reasonable priced or even for free, in those early stages. So it's become, a lot lower cost to perform, proof of concepts. And part of that is the technology, part of that is the amount of competition for the types of things that we need to use to differentiate. We're able to better evaluate, buy solutions, products, side by side. Now that we can actually put these sandboxes up so quickly, as we've continued to modernize our systems, we've also just led with setting the strategy and the direction of where we were going. And I think that's helped us overall across our organization. Everybody starting to adopt the test and learn. Now we can't we can't let everybody feast on different opportunities, right? So we set some direction, but definitely with our cloud first strategy, and our ability to look at these build and buy so much quicker. It's really allowed us to do those right up front in a project. So we build them in. Earlier, I was talking about our digital initiatives. As part of each digital initiative, we spend 5% of the expected time just on POC to confirm we're even able to do it. And those are things that would have taken months in the past and can literally be done in weeks. So it affords us more time in the projects to actually run pilots with our customers as well, to make sure we get it right before we even roll out.
Thank you. Thank you both. And just because I don't want Cynthia to feel like I was only picking on her with a question from the audience, I'm going to throw it back to both of you and allow kind of as a team effort again. So one question from the audience was that isn't the pendulum swinging back some? Since we're talking about risk, I think this is kind of appropriate here. So isn't the pendulum swinging back some? So the ease of use is having to give way to better security. So I don't know if I'll put it out there to anybody if anybody wants to raise their hand, step forward on that one. So kind of I guess a balance between what makes it easier for the customer, and I think when we talk about easier too, a lot of things that maybe we didn't touch upon as we roll into it a little bit more detail, right? One click, one touch, automation, and things like that, right? Straight through as much as possible. So is there a balance or a tipping point somewhere, or is the pendulum swing one direction or another, where security starts to become a concern? You can only go so far. You only make it so secure without still allowing for those things.
I'll respond a little on that one. So, here's an analogy that I find very, very true to this industry as well. So, going through security at an airport is very painful sometimes. And you're really annoyed you have to do it, but you're really happy everybody else is doing it. So that's kind of, with the industry, that's where we are. It's, you don't want to put these obstacles in front of people to be able to log in and access their information or change their password, and they got to access their email. Then you have multi-factor authentication, and you have captures and all these different widgets and features to make sure we know that you are who you say you are. And it's a little bit of annoying, but at the same time, if you didn't have them and someone got into your account and committed fraud, that you wish you would. So, I mean, we're still on the learning curve in the retirement space. I think, probably the banking industry, clearly the e-com industry is ahead of us, but I think we'll come to a balancing act, and I don't think we've had it just yet, because I think there are some providers that are more heavily weighted on cybersecurity, and are kind of impacting that experience a lot, but again, justifying it because of the risk aversion that they have in the business model, where others are clearly saying, listen, if Amazon and Walmart and Target can do these things and Citibank, why can't we as a retirement provider? So they're starting to adopt the more user-friendly type security authentication model. So I still think we're a ways off from really finding the balance, but it's something we're clearly fighting with right now.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I mean, just, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree with Eric. I don't think that ease of use and security are mutually exclusive. I just think the approaches we've taken in this industry so far have been pretty antiquated, and you can get both in many other industries today. So we just need to be a little more innovative in that.
Yeah, I think too. Just ask anybody that's had been a victim of cybersecurity fraud or something like that, which side that they prefer as an industry to err on, right? So err on the side of caution, and I think that's prudent. I think, and then continue to look for ways that we can make that a better experience overall for them, while still providing the same security in that. So it will be a challenge. It's something we'll have to be looking for. So, Cynthia, wanting to change is one thing, and even recognizing what needs to be changed is another, right? Jason talked about the fast pace in which technology is advancing and utilizing that to kind of help shrink the overall time to deployment, right? What is your take on the industry's current technology environment as a whole? What are you seeing? Is the current infrastructure ready to handle near-term and frequent changes that coming about just not due to regulatory adjustments, but as Bala alluded to as well, demographic changes in its customers?
Yeah, and I'm certainly not meaning to be disparaging of any providers of technology to the industry. I think this, however, I will say that there's no company that we talk to that doesn't say that they have never been as challenged as they are today from a technology perspective. The rate of change is moving faster and faster. The expectations are moving faster and faster. And as agile as we all might want to be, I think as an industry, our technology environments again are too complicated. They are full of user customization. They are full of systems that are barely integrated. They are very, very complicated in terms of how they're set up. And part of that, I think, is because we have been in business such a long time. And many of us have more legacy platforms that serve as the core. And then we've tried to avoid changing that out. So we've added 100,000 different things on the edges that, again, make things very complicated. So, I think at this point, I would say, whether you're using a licensed software on a really customized basis, or you're using it on a fairly standard basis, or you have in-house software, I think everybody is equally challenged for different reasons. So I wouldn't want to be the head of technology. I wouldn't want Jason's job right now.
All right, excellent, good. Thank you, Cynthia. All right, let's say we start making changes today. Okay, we've talked about some of them, right? Yeah. How can someone try and future-proof their environment to ensure a continued focus on user experience? Oh, you might be on mute again, Bala. Sorry.
Audible now? All right. No, I fully empathize with what Eric and Jason said. I think I understand this risk perception on the provider end, and there is indeed a lot of risk. And they've also been, the industry has seen some of these endeavors of rip and replace or modernizing platforms fail badly, and that only reinforces that perception. But if we all believe that we don't need to modernize, then that would be actually a recipe for disaster in one sense. So the approach I would take and I would recommend is that people really look at modular point solution based approach. Take one operation area or one business area which has got high impact, prioritize like Jason said, and modernize with contemporary microservices-based architecture and cloud-based solutions that are easier to implement, integrate them with existing backend systems. And once a lot of these key areas have been modernized, then you can really look at replacing the backend. Okay, so that's one approach I would say. So using the approach, the advantages I see are, first of all, the internal team sees and celebrates a series of small wins. That gives us the confidence to keep moving forward in this journey. It's not an all or nothing approach. You wait for 6-7 years and then suddenly it doesn't work out and there is a despondency in the whole team that, hey, we should stick with what we have. So I think that's, celebrating small wins is important. And the migration to future-proof architecture like cloud and microservices, as opposed to existing monolithic code, is achieved as the end outcome, even if you take the point solutions approach. And this low-risk approach really gives you a transformational outcome in this day of accelerated digitalization, as opposed to what one of my provider friends calls a lipstick on the pig approach, which essentially achieves cosmetic improvements. I think that's the significant thing. Any initiative you take as a provider, and we as technology providers have to actually transform to a future-proof state. I think that should be the objective, as opposed to making superficial and cosmetic changes. That would be my prescription, if I will.
Well, there you have it, right? So thank you all. There's just really so much to consider that I think often it's hard to know where even to start. Now, I know in the past with expensive technologies and a focus on decompression, people always had to choose between upgrades, right? And, with modernization, often at the cost of improving the user experience, or huge digital initiatives that tried to be too all-encompassing. So I think now technology has taken 3 giant strides forward. As Eric discussed, we can be looking for things like plug-and-play type solutions, right? That can offer a best-in-class experience without having to do it all at once. We can try and do this in an incremental approach, right? A modular way, right? Maybe helping to mitigate some of the fears of disruption that Cynthia talked about. But one thing to me is clear. Now, the technology and ideas of yesterday aren't going to be able to manage the expectations of the sponsors and participants today, let alone tomorrow, right? So we'll need to be creative and mindful in our approach of implementing them, whether that be a well laid out journey, or maybe it's more, have more options available to us that we can do small improvements along the way. But, as rapidly as technology is evolving, I'm sure that there's going to be more options tomorrow, which I think is pretty exciting. The one thing I'd request, though, is that we all ease off AI a little bit until 2020 is over. The idea of murderous machine learning retirement robots taking over the human race is a little bit too much on brand for 2020. So we can cool it in that area for a little bit. That's my only request, I think, of the audience out there for a little while. Anyways, I'd like to thank our panelists today for the help in putting together this discussion. My hope is that people were able to walk away with at least one thing to think about. There were some other great questions in there that was sent along the way. I'm sorry, even my fast-speaking Boston accent wasn't able to get through this quick enough to be able to address all of them. But if you'd like, please join us in our virtual booth following the panel discussion directly after, and we'll be happy to talk about those a little bit more and continue the discussion. So thank you all again today. Thank you to my panelists, and everyone have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks, Lucas. Thanks, Jason, Eric, and Cynthia. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.